Main Events. What could I say about him? I mean, this used to be the staple of boxing, man. I mean, from the 80s all the way through, the Main Events was it, man. They had everybody. They had Mike McCullough. They had like all the East Coast fighters that you could imagine. You know, they had them all under one banner at that time. They had Pinkley Thomas, Holyfield brought in a lot of money for them, but over the years they squandered opportunities by selling people out to be gatekeepers just for the money instead of really developing the talent they had. You know, they had Mark Breland. You know, they screwed over a lot of people. Well, instead of just to try to get the quick buck, that I thought if they really tried to build a fighter up instead of just set him up for the spike, they could have really had something, and they could have been as big as Top Rank is right now. Because they were, for a while, they were the major players in the game. You know, and Fernando Vargas was keeping them afloat, but they were so busy in pushing him, not realizing he wasn't just ready yet for these type of fights. And you could damage your fighter if you keep pushing them up the way they are. And I've seen the changes that happened, because after Fernando Vargas, there was a gap in between all those years, like since he retired and was gone, where Main Events really was losing their fighters. You know, and they had Rocky Warriors, they lost him, and they used to get everybody that came out of the Olympics. They scouts would pick them up. But once Golden Boy Promotions came into play, and they just started buying people up left and right, and now you got companies like Main Events and everybody else, they trying to jockey for position to try to hold on to what they have. You know, and they lost Juan Diaz, then things started getting a little dizzy. You know, Don King ended up picking him up. And then he went from Don King to Golden Boy. So it was a whole different learning experience and a whole different curve at that time, because they decided they're going to build their fighters up using what they had in a stable, by doing it on a smaller level and a smarter level, because they were trying to keep their fighters from going out and branching out to the other companies for money. So they stayed with what the staple was. They had a good Polish community with Thomas Adamek, and they kept using Thomas Adamek and putting him in fights where all the Polish people are going to come out and see him, and they're going to support him. And they had Chris Areola. They did the same thing with Areola. They said, we're going to keep Areola winning, and we're going to, well, they didn't have Chris Areola. Goose and Tudor had him. But they were building up fights where Chris Areola was going to eventually fight Thomas Adamek once he lost to Klitschko. And they wanted to make that fight as quickly as possible at heavyweight, because they knew what they had. And I knew that Thomas Adamek would beat him easy, because it's an easy fight for Adamek, because Areola's going to beat himself. Then you have Thomas Adamek at the top. They got Zab Judah back, because Zab already had a name. If Zab was smart, he would have gotten with Al Heyman and said, I already got a name. I could sell some fights. Let's go make some good fights out here. And they're rebuilding Zab back in the community, putting him in with C+ fighters, which was good, and building him back up, getting his confidence back, so they could put him in another community to where he can make some money. And then they do what they do. They take him up to the top, then they feed him to the top dog or some other company, and then when that guy fighter beat him and he's back down to nothing, then they working trying to build him back up to make some more money off of him. You know, and this is only going to get you so far. And they did the same thing to Thomas Adamek. But here they got Cunningham. USS Cunningham. And when you got a fighter like this, who's determined, who's focused, and, you know, he's a great fighter. It's just that he might get caught sometimes, he might get knocked out, but he's a good boxer. He needs to get back to boxing. He uses his angles well sometimes, but his thing is he forgets the jab, and then he ends up making a fight tougher than what it needs to be. Now this fight against Thomas Adamek, the rematch, it took years for him to get. They're both now label mates of main events. If he beats Adamek, main events lose out on a lot of money, and Adamek value goes even lower than what it is now. So they needed him to win that fight. They needed him to win so they could say, hey, he got this win over Dangerous Cunningham. And they could still sell Cunningham because he's good. And they know they got a talented fighter. They've done this millions of times before. What they're going to do is say, all right, Steve, we're going to make this up to you. You know, Jolene, they know what they're doing. Kathy and Jolene, they're going to run this the way they've always ran it, you know, just keep things moving. You know, main events, you know, I wanted them to succeed and do great. They had a lot of people that worked through them. It's sad what happened to Calvin Brock, you know, and his situation. You know, I talked to you guys before, and we got along beautifully. I used to love this company a lot, but the way you did, Steve, it's a black eye to the sport. I understand your business reasons as to why you want to cross this guy, but he exposed everything with Adamek. The guy cannot deal with anyone who jabs. If you can box, you can beat him. The guy is really flat-footed, he's slow, he pushes his punches. You can see it. Every mistake he makes in a ring, you see, and that's not me. I'm not going to sit here and just bash a fighter and sit here and I'm going to tell you what he does wrong. I'm going to tell you what his mistakes are and why he is the way he is in my opinion. Now, if you see him do things that's other than, then you can let me know. All you got to do is throw overhand rights because he has no defense to block the overhand rights. Now that he's at heavyweight, he's slower. So he can't get away from the right hands like he would normally do when he was a cruiserweight. His problem is he still ate right hands as a cruiserweight. I mean, we want to be honest, Paul Briggs beat him twice. You know, he got screwed both times. But Main Events has got the NBC deal going on with their boxing series. So they want to make sure they keep putting Adamek in a winning position, so they might put him on that NBC show and get him on a card there. They're going to do Cunningham the same way. And, you know, they got money coming in on the back end, so they feel really good about that. And then they could put together their own, you know, little shows or whatever. But Main Events, I mean, over this decision, everyone's going to say blame the judges for the decision and not Main Event. Look, these judges know who promotion they're working for. They know what's going on. Come on. We're not silly. We're grown. We know exactly what's happening in the sport. And it's killing it. That's why we have to do what we have to do to go ahead and expose all of this stuff. That's our job. We got to bring this to the light so that the people will talk about it so they would know. That's our job. You know, so it is. Peace.